Okay, let's discuss Vegas. Grab my trusty marker. Now, Vegas had a season that divided hockey fans. Let's be honest, there are people who believe in Vegas, and then there's people who really, really don't, and are really tired of hearing about Vegas, to the point where even though this is the third to last preview of the year, people are like, oh, I'm tired of hearing about Vegas. I haven't done a Vegas video in a while. And it's honestly been because there hasn't been a lot to report on. They made a couple of pickups during the off season, one major one in Stastny, and minor moves. But what do you have to fix? You get 109 points and you lose in the finals. Now there are going to be people who say, well, they lost James Neal. James Neal didn't play as big a role in their success in the second half and in the playoffs as he did in the first half of the season. So while, yes, he was early on their star player and looked like he was the feel-good story for the team, there were a lot of other guys who were stepping up later on in the season. And they've lost Perron, but again, when Perron was hurt, it didn't really affect their win-loss record adversely. So I don't blame George McPhee for doing what he did. The biggest factor for Vegas is Gerard Gallant. We can get into all of this, but what Gerard Gallant did this past year was stunning. And it all goes back to when he was fired by the Panthers, because ownership didn't like how he was deploying their players. And Gallant wasn't given credit for the fact that he was playing the right players in the right situations. And if he wasn't, then why did Vegas succeed? This team on paper has no business finishing with 109 points or losing in the finals. No business. But hard work and embracing this idea that they're a team of rejects worked. Now, that's going to change this year. And I think it's going to affect their overall record. Because now, really, that misfits thing kind of goes by the wayside. Because you've lost some players from last year's team. You've brought some new guys in. And the new guys that got brought in aren't misfits. They're guys who've chosen to go to Vegas. They're guys who may have been wanted by other teams. Stastny, Jets wanted him back. So they've chosen to be in Vegas. This is totally different than last year. Stastny's number 1 on the cap hit list. Number 2 is Fleury. Number 3 is Tatar. Carlson's number 4. But William Karlsson's an RFA next year. They've kept him hungry, meaning he should have another excellent season. Does he score 40 again? I don't think so. Personally, I don't think he'll score 40 again. I think he'll probably score about 30. But I still think they're in good shape. And 5th on the cap hit list is Smith and Marchessault. Marchessault got a pretty hefty amount of money. When you look at what Marchessault got in his contract, and you look at some of the contracts that have been handed out this offseason, Marchessault is a bargain. He is a huge bargain. Plus player for me is Karlsson, and I thought about Smith and Marchessault, but Karlsson for me is the plus player. He is the guy that, when he's on, they're intimidatingly good. But the MVP, of course, is Marc-Andre Fleury. This team goes as far as Fleury takes them. The minus player for me is Tatar, and I've had this debate before about Tatar. He did not look like he fit in very well in Vegas. He may not have been happy about being traded to Vegas. Maybe he wanted to stay in Detroit. His numbers, the goals are still there. 20 goals. He had 35 points. And that's not worthy of the amount of money that he gets paid. Remember, Tatar gets paid more this coming season than Karlsson, Smith, and Marchessault. So there'll be pressure on him to produce. And it is up to him to show that bringing him in was genius rather than folly. Because they did give up 3 draft picks to get him. Their top 6 forwards, Marchessault, Karlsson, Smith, Tatar, Stastny, and Tuch. Now, Haula had a ton of goals and will likely not want to lose a lot of ice time to Stastny. I think they're going to end up rolling 3 lines offensively. So I could have done a top 9, but then I would have had 20-some other fan bases saying, why didn't you do top 9 for us? And then it turns into just do the whole lineup, and then it's just a nightmare. But this is a very solid top 6. And Tuch grew into that role, and I think he's going to take that next step next year as well. And this is a very solid top 6. Now, when the expansion draft took place a year ago, we looked at the blue line and said that's a sorry blue line. And McNabb, Schmidt, Theodore, England, the idea was, well, where's the offense going to come from? And I thought Jason Garrison could rediscover something. I was just clueless. And he rediscovered the American Hockey League. But Schmidt came through last year. Schmidt looked amazing. Theodore really genuinely is going to be a solid NHL level defenseman. The fact that the Ducks could jettison him to make sure they didn't lose anybody that they really wanted to keep, and also to get rid of Stoner's contract, it says a lot about the depth in Anaheim. And England had the best season this past year that he's ever had, and I really think he'd admit that. And McNabb had some spotty points at time, and of course, Pat Sajak called him Brandon McNabb, which caused me to kind of lose my mind a bit. It's Braden McNabb. And Schmidt stepped forward out of leaving Washington, and as one of the misfits, as they called themselves, had an amazing season. And in net, it's Fleury and Subban. I not a fan of Malcolm Subban as a starter, but as a backup, I think he'll be just fine. So what a lot of this comes down to is Fleury's health. If Fleury can stay healthy, then Vegas can be dangerous. Absolutely. If Fleury gets hurt, and he has in previous seasons before going to Vegas, it's like Vegas was this elixir for him. But if he gets hurt, then I do have some questions about the Vegas ability. And again, I know this past season they ended up being all the way down to Dylan Ferguson at one point, but that was last year, and the odds of that happening 2 years in a row. Again, Vegas likes to play the odds, and you don't like making gambling references when you're talking about Vegas, but it's kind of hard not to when you've got a team that entirely was a gamble putting in the desert, is a huge success. And again, and this is something that comes up a lot where people say, well, yeah, but when the team struggles, then fans aren't going to come out. I really don't think that's going to be a problem. Vegas is a city where there's a lot for tourists to do. This is something for the locals to do. This is something the locals enjoy. This is something that you can fly to Vegas for cheap and watch a hockey game in a completely different city. And clearly, from the amount of visiting fans that were in Vegas at the start of the year, that's a popular idea. So I think with Vegas being a tourist trap anyways, and there are plenty of guys around North America that'll go, man, I want to see my team play. They're in Vegas. Shucks, I have to go to Vegas. Oh, this sucks. It's not like you're going to see them in the middle of the tundra. You're going to see them in the middle of the desert. There's a lot of gambling. There's a lot of fun stuff to do there. And oh, by the way, you can watch hockey games. So it's honestly a fantastic situation. Now, additions to the team, you've got Stastny, Holden, Carr, and Fucale. And I have Fucale on the board only because of what I said about their goaltenders. Subban makes me kind of nervous, but Dansk made me nervous. Dansk looked fine. And Fucale is another one of those who cast off by Montreal, but he was a well-thought-of prospect, and there's no reason to think that he can't turn it around in a new organization. That being said, we'll see. I don't think he makes anywhere near this roster for a while, but I think if he can be the American Hockey League backup, and again, I'm kind of scrunching my face, he may end up being their East Coast goaltender, but he is noteworthy because of his name. Rookies, and this is where I've discussed this with Vegas fans. George McPhee doesn't want teenagers in the NHL. Teenagers don't belong in the NHL. George, teenagers are in the NHL. I hate to tell George this, but there are teenagers in the NHL, and there are a lot of them. And some of these teenagers that Vegas has got, they're pretty talented. This is Eric Brandstrom, and you won't be able to see it on there. I know, it's all scrunched up. Cody Glass, Nick Hague, all 19 or younger. And I really think Glass is going to push for a job. And I have Nick Suzuki with asterisks because I don't think he makes it, but he was a first rounder last year, so it's worth mentioning him. But if Glass comes into camp and he has an amazing training camp, and if during the preseason he plays really well, and he looks ready, let's just say he looks ready, does George McPhee actually say, man, this kid looks great and he'd be awesome in our lineup, I'm sending him down? I don't think so. George McPhee kind of has done some thinking on the fly, not at the expansion draft table. I think he went in knowing exactly who he was going to grab. But if you look at last year, this was supposed to be Fleury and Pickard. He saw something in Pickard that made him say, I don't think so. Or his pro scout did. And said, Pickard's not positionally sound. We need to upgrade our backup. And he knew to go get Malcolm Subban when Boston put him on waivers. So I really think that if Glass pushes for a job, or Brandstrom pushes for a job on the blue line, or Haig pushes for a job on the blue line, they'll get it. Because he is a smart enough GM to know, and I know there's Washington fans who may be a little bit triggered at the comment that he's a smart GM, but he clearly knew what he was doing here. He may have learned from mistakes he made in Washington and said, I'm not doing that again. And he's run this very well. Now, how does the channel see this finishing? 29.6% of the vote went towards Vegas being first. 32% of the vote said Vegas would be second. 17% said third. 8.5% said fourth. And then we get into the fans who think that this is going to fall apart. 4.6% at fifth. 3.7% at sixth. 2.4% at seventh. 1.1% of the vote said eighth. The 1.1%, clearly fans who do not like Vegas or the story that's been told by the Golden Knights. And that's fine. That's not the end of the world that they feel that way. But for me, I have Vegas at second. I honestly think Vegas is going to fall back somewhat this year. I think they're probably still going to hit 100 points. I don't know that they get over 100 points. I think that this is a lineup that should be able to hang in the Pacific. And I know people always say, oh, the Pacific sucks. It doesn't, though. San Jose makes the final in 2016. So, again, that fallback I don't think is going to be dramatic. But the other part, too, is that, and I know I have a lot of Vegas fans that watch, so I'm going to put it this way. Do I see them going back to the finals? No. The 2018 run was great, but teams don't generally go back to the finals for 2 years in a row because we have so much parity in the league. I think teams will have watched how Washington beat their defense, and they're going to have to adapt, and they're going to have to change their game a bit. I think that there are a lot of teams in the West that are due, and I look at Winnipeg as being a team that's probably due. Nashville, I could see getting back over that hump. I could see them having one last run in them, with Pekka Rinne as the starter. And San Jose, I don't think can be discounted. I think San Jose is going to come in with a chip on their shoulder this year. But this is going to be interesting because, again, I have them at second. Which means I'm putting them ahead of the Kings. I'm putting them ahead of the Flames, the Oilers, everybody else. This has to hold up. And Fleury has to continue to be the MVP. As long as that happens, they are still a playoff team, but Stanley Cup contender is a tough one to keep when there are issues that I think got covered up through the year. I think there was a lot of momentum. I think there was a lot of fun to be had with that. But at the same time, it's more about this year building towards next year. I think with some of the prospects they have, I think Vegas, yeah, they're going to be fine long term. But again, it was a hell of a ride in 2017-18, and I think it's going to be more realistic for them in this second season, where some of those games where they just win out of nowhere, I think some of that's going to go away because teams should be more capable of anticipating and figuring some of that stuff out. But that being said, I am picking them for second place. And it is a good division, and I think Arizona's getting better. I think Calgary and Edmonton are going to bounce back. I think LA with Kovalchuk should get some kind of a push, whether it's just the first 20 games or however long it lasts. They should get a bit of a push up the standings. And as I said, San Jose is going to come in kind of angry this year. So Vegas, I still see as being second in the division. Gerard Gallant could prove me wrong. And with George McPhee in charge, if there's some kind of a fallback in October or early November, I would expect him to find a way to remedy it pretty darn quick. But there you go. there you go. The Vegas Golden Knights 2018-19 season preview. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as always. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.